Hello everyone, welcome back to the Art by Casey Brom YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing part 2 of the fly fishing Goblin. This is going to be a time lapse, so it's going to be moving a little bit quicker, and I'm just going to do a voiceover to kind of talk you through what I'm doing. Alright, let's check it out. Alright, so here what I'm doing is I'm just starting to tackle some of the details. Last time we left off we were just kind of roughing things out still, so what I'm doing is going over with a new layer. With some black, pure black, and just going on with that charcoal brush, dropping in a few more details, defining a few more things, kind of using all those rough lines to make some fun decisions. Here I'm really focused on the shape of the ears and the kind of the sideburns that ended up kind of developing out of nowhere. A few details like pockets on the vest. And you'll see I still make choices about a lot of things still. You'll see some fairly major changes as we go, about background and everything else that's happening here. So yeah, just going through making sure that I know where everything goes, making sure that things make sense anatomically as much as they could make sense on a goblin, I guess. Here just adding a few details again, going in, looking at all the little pieces and parts, thinking a little bit about the lighting, zooming out a little bit to make sure I get all the details. I don't think details need to be the main focus of any piece, and this line drawing step can be probably overdone because you're going to be getting some busyness coming in from all these lines. So I want to make sure not to add too much. But the nice thing is we can always move forward and backwards, meaning I can always make things darker, lighter, more defined, more contrast, less contrast. None of that's locked in yet. So here I'm going with a really bright color. I just did a color grab of some of that green, and now I'm focusing on a few more highlights, making sure it's got a bit more of a green feel. You'll see I color grab a lot, so I'm just using that eyedropper and touching on different parts of the canvas to grab some color that I want. So I'm working with a similar palette. You can start to see the character be defined a little bit more. Some of these lines are pretty interesting, and I still make some choices about where things should go and how things should feel. It can all change. I could even, grab whole sections of it and turn and flip and move. It's kind of the joys of Photoshop. Part of what I'm doing here is you'll see a lot of color grabbing, and what I'm doing is just kind of evening things out throughout the piece so that my big color transitions aren't so extreme where I don't want them to be, like in around the face. See, I'm using a dark blue color here, or dark gray, just to kind of add in some of the extra pieces. Again, color grabbing off the hat to define what that color is going to be. And this is all on a normal layer, and I'm just painting it on, blending. Here I've got an airbrush on here, and just kind of grabbing it a little bit more. And yeah, big choices are being made. I couldn't decide if I wanted that to be light or dark, so I'm just going back and forth, trying to define some more shadow and shape. I want it to be pretty moody. It looks pretty grumpy. Pretty soon I start thinking more about my background, but for right now I'm really still focusing on the character. You can see those big shadows coming in, makes the lighting very dramatic and interesting. And I might decide that's a bit too extreme, so I can go and pull things back out a little bit, and it's that back and forth that kind of adds detail and depth to the piece. But yeah, overall I hope you guys are having fun watching this, and I'm hoping to do more soon. I'm just kind of figuring out how to do all this YouTube stuff, so just let me know in the comments what you think, how things are going. Make sure to comment with what you think we should be drawing next too. So you can see what I'm doing now is making sure that I have definition between the character and the background, and I'll knock that all back again, but for right now I want to make sure that I know where my outside lines are and where things go, all of which can still change, of course. And yeah, you'll see I use the eyedropper a lot, just reaching and grabbing different colors off the palette already. Here I start to play with, I like this cold background. He's got a lot of warms with the browns and the green, just these nice warm colors. So I thought a nice cold background would match in really nice. So here I'm just using an airbrush, a little bit small to start, just to try to figure out the edges. But yeah, I start liking this color. You'll see I jump back and forth about how this is going to look a few times. But there's always room to make changes and choices. See, this kind of defines the edge of the character a little bit more. I like that nice cool color. You can still see a little bit of that original background poking through, which just gives it some nice texture. Let's crank the size up a little bit here. I'm a little bit indecisive about exactly what I want to do. So I just start playing around with some darker colors, like a shadow created by the hat. Try to start to see what that's going to look like. And then I got this idea of vertical lines, because just the color, I think, made me think, hey, this looks wet and cold, so maybe some rain is in order. So I'm just using an airbrush here. I don't like to use a lot of the like pre-made texture, like dust and debris and those kind of brushes. I like the natural brush strokes. They have their place, but typically I just use actual strokes, more like traditional media. So I'm just kind of thinking, hey, rain is pretty fun. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do that and make it look like it matches the piece. I really like the rain kind of pouring off the top of his hat and dripping off his ears, and kind of explains his misery a little bit. There we go. So what I'm doing now is thinking about he's top lit, so the light's coming down and hitting the top of him. I'm very indecisive here. I don't know if I like it or not. This is part of that kind of ugly stage where I'm like, oh no, this is awful. So I'm just playing around with all the different layers and backgrounds to try to figure out if this is exactly the feel I want to go for, what needs to happen to make it feel the way I want it to. So I decided to just kind of go with it and start defining things a little bit more. I'm back into a normal layer and just going and defining some of these colors a little bit more. Going and grabbing some highlights off the eyes. It's kind of fun to just go around and play, and that's one of the greatest things I think about Photoshop, is to be able to just run around, change things as you go. No final choices need to be made. Oh, here I'm having some big ideas about dropping him back a little bit. He looked so out of place. I felt he was so bright and the background was so dark that he felt out of place. So what I'm doing is just kind of playing around with that idea a little bit more, knocking him back a little bit, bringing my value range, so my lights and my darks a little bit closer together by brushing over it with an airbrush. Then I can go in and really start defining things a little bit. Figuring out, oh yeah, here I start playing with the beard and hair, which is fun because hair is just kind of fun. You can decide how curly you want it to be, how straight you want it to be, what color you want it to be, how the light's reflecting off of it, if it's clumped together or if it's brushed apart. Just kind of, it's fun. So a little bit of white on the eyebrows. But one thing I try to be careful about with hair is not to try to organize it too much and give it kind of flow and shape. You can see the way the hair on his chin comes and folds around a little bit. Just a little bit more character. It actually kind of mirrors the shape of his nose, which is sort of fun and interesting. It's fun to think about kind of the character and shape of the piece and how the two kind of play into each other. He needed a bit more life because he looked a little bit kind of dead and zombie-ish, so a little bit more kind of pinks and contrasts between the greeny blues and the yellows and and some little tusks. But yeah, I'm just kind of I was adding just kind of some orange and red kind of in the spots where you'd be able to have a little bit of transparency through the skin. So I imagine like his skin tone is green, but he still has kind of a pinky feeling underneath that. Because there's, red blood flowing underneath. I'd like to thank the folks that suggested this one. It's been pretty fun, and I'm starting to have more ideas about what this character could be doing. Maybe he's not only into fishing, maybe he's into hunting, or you know, who knows? We'll kind of see. Maybe we'll play with this character again. So I think someone's already suggested making him turkey hunting, which would be pretty fun. Something I wish we could do around here, but we don't have any turkeys, so a little bit challenging. Again, just going and defining and figuring out where my edges are, where my highlights are, where all that stuff kind of goes. I'm thinking about lighting the whole time. I'm always thinking about a few different things. I'm thinking about form and function. So how do the different shapes work together to give this guy a functioning, body? And of course, with kind of these fantasy and these sort of fantasy or sci-fi kind of stuff, you can play around with that a little bit, but there's still kind of a level of understanding that's necessary. I'm not saying that this guy's perfect or anything. He's just kind of a, quick sketch in a way. You could spend hours and hours rendering and shaping and forming this guy up really, really good. I like the way his bulgy belly just kind of sticks out with his little belly button sticking out there. I start playing around with my highlights and lowlights. You see I'm always playing around with the layers, zooming in and out, see what it looks like. Sometimes they'll even flip the canvas, so you can set up a flip the canvas button. You can just flip the canvas back and forth to make sure your shapes are making sense. So here I've actually gone and flattened the whole image down into one layer. Because I like it enough that this layer, that everything that's there is okay. So then I want to just be able to go on top and edit everything kind of together. So the easiest way to do that is flatten. If you merge, you tend to get a bit of a different result because the overlay layers act differently when you merge them. Well, here I'm just darkening up some of the rain. It's just not gloomy enough. So I'm getting the airbrush again and just kind of really cranking up the gloom factor. And if I overdo it, that's fine. I can always go into the opacity of my layer, turn it up or down. I usually paint it on at 100%, and then I can always take it back a bit if I need to. So again, gloomy, 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 really getting dark. And it's kind of up to me what I want to do with how dark that's going to be. So here now I'm actually playing with, I think, the eraser. Yeah, I've got the eraser going, and I'm actually pulling a little bit of that dark off just to, texture it, give it a bit more texture, kind of modularize it a little bit. I was playing with some reflected light coming out. I'm imagining like puddles or water in front of him, but I couldn't figure it out on the hand just how I wanted it. But I've got to go find that fishing rod back. The rod kind of disappeared in all these other layers. I think it's a fun challenge to work with suggestions because it's not my own idea, so I have to kind of make do with other people's ideas and make it into my own. So the original idea was a goblin learning to fly fish, but it sounded a bit complicated, so I just fly fishing goblin. I mean, we talked about that in the first video. The idea just kind of came along. It's not an overly dynamic pose or anything, but I haven't really drawn a goblin before, so just kind of figuring out what he could look like. Looking back, I probably could have used a bit more reference for things like the feather and the hat and all that kind of thing. But again, it's just kind of a quick sketch, getting an idea down. And we took it a bit further, but there's just so much kind of tinkering happening here. Playing around with the, lighting on the edges. Where's the light coming down from? It's kind of fun to watch this again in kind of fast motion. So now I'm going to go start playing around some more of the details. I think the vest looked kind of just like boring and blah, and there was kind of a lack of kind of these color bumps. So I thought, a bright red fly is stuck in the fleece of his fly vest here. And another one, because you can't just have one. Maybe some greens in there. I Again, complement the skin tones, but add a little punch color. And some little details on the vest. I should really zoom these videos in a little bit more. But here I got kind of snaps and buckles and kind of the pulls of the fabric as it all comes together over his bulging form. Not typically a good kind of bulging. Maybe goblins, you know, the goal is to have a pot belly, who knows. Yeah, again, some little details. Stitching on the shirt, wrinkles on the face. Just going around with a really dark black and touching up a bunch of details. It's just a normal layer, no multiply or anything. Just going and touching up. Now what I'm doing is just kind of blending some of the colors. So you'll see me color grab a lot and just kind of blending out some of these shapes and forms. If things are too sketchy and messy, this is a stage where I'll clean it all up. Now I start playing around with these wrinkles and they just stop making sense. So, but I do mess around with them for a while. I decided a little bit more color on here. So you see a color grab, adjust a little bit in the color finder. But then I decided these wrinkles don't make any sense. So I'm going to go add some little pockets down here, more of a traditional looking fly vest. So I even out those wrinkles just by color grabbing and blending a little bit by just grabbing different pieces. So I just find somewhere on the vest where I have a color I like for my shadow, grab that, and add it into where it needs to be. That way you can just go back and forth color grabbing all the time with the eyedropper and just really building and blending. And of course this is still just kind of quick, so I could take that a lot further and just smooth out all those lines if I really wanted it to look smooth and even. And some stitching, why not add some detail? Just kind of fun. You can see how it has a little bit of a different feel than the rest of the drawing, which, I'm unsure about. But again, this isn't like a final composed piece. But you can see I'm just going around wherever I need the colors. I find it almost quicker to color grab off the background or somewhere on the painting rather than trying to go to the color finder all the time. You've always got your history swatches there too, to kind of go and find colors back. Once in a while I'm just sitting back and kind of trying to figure out if things work or not. There's a lot of zooming in and out there. I don't know what I was doing. Most of this was done late at night, so not all great choices are being made. I zoom in and out. I kind of view it as a thumbnail when I zoom way out. I mean, I'm drawing this on a fairly large screen, 25 inches, but it's nice to kind of shrink it way down and kind of see it far away to kind of make sure that your shapes and things kind of make sense. Not saying that they're perfect here. I'm going to start working on the wrinkles of the arm and then realize that the muscle structure is completely wrong on that, what would be his right arm. So at some point here, I'm going to go and be like, well, what's going on here? Fix that all up. And then I realized that the hand, I just completely neglected it this whole time. So I need to go and figure out what's actually happening there. Oh yeah, here's me fixing that muscle shapes on the arm. Again, lots of color grabbing and blending. Not worried about that arm hair that I put on there. I can find that back again later. Moving my way down, realizing that this hand doesn't make any sense. So just kind of shaping that up. Again, lots of color grab, lots of blending, just to give it some structure and shape. And yeah, optimally this would have been done at the beginning, but again, joys of Photoshop. Really easy to just go in and make it match. Change the shape. Just adding some details here. Grabbing a little bit. Adding some kind of lanky fingers. Wrapping around there. I decided he needs big kind of nasty fingernails, so I grab a bit of the color from the teeth and go in here and just fix that up. Again, reflected light coming up and hitting the hand from maybe puddles or something. And see, I'm thinking a lot about what's happening even outside of the image. So where's the light coming from? Where's the light reflecting off of? That sort of thing. And you'll see in the final piece, there's like light bouncing up off the brim of his hat and off of his arms and all sorts of places. Here I'm adding a little bit more of that as well through some arm hair because he's got to be kind of hairy. I don't know. I'm just going again, cleaning up a little bit, trying to make things make sense. If there's buttons at the top, there should be buttons all the way down. So I'm just throwing some buttons, some snaps, kind of brass snaps all the way down. And just little details here and there. That belt was completely neglected. The whole waders and everything I just kind of left them down there. So I'll just add some texture to the belt. Waders again were neglected, so I'm just kind of adding some shape, and that brings that kind of front leg forward into more of a step and shoots that other leg backwards a little bit. You'll see in the final piece too, I do a bit more shadowing to kind of push that back leg so he's kind of stepping out and towards the viewer. And now it's the stage when I start to be like, okay, well maybe this is gonna work. Maybe I kind of do know what I'm doing. So once in a while, there's always that self-doubt happening, which makes kind of sharing these videos a little bit challenging sometimes, but yeah, it feels good to share it and kind of share the experience and the pain of making mistakes. So yeah, we're getting pretty close to the end here. I'm just playing around. The last few things I'm not sure about. I realize now, like if I went back and edited a few things, number one thing, the top of that hat is just kind of soft, and that doesn't really make sense. It should have more of a crispness to it. Here I'm fixing it a little bit, but I really should have spent more time on that. Yeah, this is kind of coming to the end of it now. I just save it and close it, and there it is. You can see I added a bit more shadow. Okay, thanks for watching part 2 of the Goblin flat fishing video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and also comment below what you think we should do next time. All right, we'll see you then.